So, guys, welcome to another special edition of all things football. Of course, Europe's biggest leagues have almost all come to its end, and a few clubs faced their judgment day last night and over the past couple of days after some insane football, not only from the Premier League but also from the Championship. Today, I'm joined by. I feel like it's a bit of an ambush, to be quite honest. I'm joined by a couple of Geordie boys. One, of course, being our resident Wasim, and then, of course, the man next to him, well known in South African media and sporting circles, a well-traveled man, and a man we can all learn from quite a bit in the romance stakes as well, seeing as he proposed to his wife over in Thailand. Some might see the ginger hair and think it resembles Sean Pollock, but here at ATF, we've managed to do one better. And we've got the fantastic Sias to Plessis in our midst. Sias, welcome to our show. However, I don't think that you're wearing the appropriate attire. I think I'm going to have to end this interview before it even gets started. Welcome to the show.
Riaz, thanks so much for that wonderful introduction. Wasim has got the right top on. Mine's a limited edition. I don't know if you can see. I'm very proud. Hold on one second. It's just, I don't know if you can see that. Can you see that? And obviously it's a famous number 9 on the back. And the main reason why I support Newcastle United is Alan Shearer. Of course, he just, I think when Supersport started showing the Premier League, we were all kind of like, I mean, a lot of us had, dads who supported Manchester United, Liverpool, all the traditional teams. The City fans weren't there. There weren't many Chelsea fans, and when I started seeing Shearer firstly turn up for Newcastle United, I was like, who are these guys? They're fantastic. And I fell in love with the club. I mean, I was fortunate to see the entertainers and catch that on TV and that, but since then, it hasn't quite been the same, has it? Wasim can attest to the fact.
Yeah, definitely not. When I started supporting the club, it was the 5-0 victory against Man United, and I was like, wow, if this team can do this to a great team like Man United, then they must be really good. And unfortunately, that was the highest it ever got. But no one told me that it's only going to be downhill from there. But it's a club that. The entertainers were really made you fall in love with the club, and once you got a team, it's very difficult then to move over.
So, there's never a dull moment, is there? There's never a dull moment.
Football itself is just an absolute ride when you follow your side, and being one of Wasim's closest friends, I've had to also be shoulder to crown on many a day. Unfortunately. I can tell you stories about Wasim locking himself in his room after Newcastle's many defeats. So it's been rough on the poor guy. We're going to get into all of that, Sias. We're going to get into all of that, Wasim. Of course, Sias, we brought you on the show to discuss mainly Newcastle United. But before we get into the football aspect and before we get into Newcastle United, of course, you're a face that's very well recognized across South Africa on television and through media. For me personally, it's a great honor to speak to you. I've only ever got to see you on Supersport, so this is a great treat for myself and for Wasim. Just to find out, when or at what age did you realize that this is the channel you wanted to take, this is what you wanted to do and to pursue? And just talk us through some of your motivation or motivations to take up this occupation and get into this industry.
Firstly, I just want to say what a pleasure it is just to be on the show. So thank you very much for having me. I don't do many, to be honest. And after Wasim's email, I was like, fellow Newcastle fan, no problem. I must be honest. I've been very blessed and very fortunate to follow the path that I've been in, and it has been luck, to be honest. It started way back at university days when I was having a few drinks after one lecture, and some mates dared me to go up to the Tux FM auditions, and I went up there and they said, no, sorry, you're too boring. And I was like, okay, cool, whatever, I'm done, move on, I'll carry on with my degree. And I got a phone call a little bit later on, about an hour later, and they said, can you do sports? And I'm like, what do you mean, can I do sport? And they're like, no, well, you like sport, right? How about you come and present sport? So I said, cool, let's do this. So literally 2 days later, I was thrown in the deep end on campus radio with my own sports show. They liked what they heard. A few days later, I was doing sport on the breakfast show with Rian van Heerden, who's on Jacaranda these days. And then I just got lucky, and I'm very, very blessed. And I can't keep saying this enough because it's not an easy industry to get into. A lot of guys have tried, and it is down to luck. And then from there, it's using your opportunity wisely. And the next thing for me was I was doing rugby games at Loftus for Tux FM, just reporting on the games. Sitting next to me was a very good friend of mine called Docky Dockrat, and he happened to be the sports editor at 702. And he said, "Don't you want to do some rugby crossings for us?" And from there, I was fortunate enough to then stand in for someone who was sick on 702, got onto 702, and then went to Supersport. And I thought, well, I can do this radio thing. Let me do the TV thing. And I actually got rejected twice by Supersport. Eventually, the third time, I said, "Here's my story. You better use it." And it was the old update channel. Before it was Blitz. And they ended up using my story. And then from there, started gradually getting shifts and that. And I ended up giving up my job as a rep with Red Bull. And I dove headfirst into this. And I've been very fortunate to have been in this game for almost 19 years in radio and television. And my only advice to you is, if you really want to do this, make sure that it's something that you realize is going to come with all sorts of obstacles along the way. And it's one thing being a sports fan and switching on Supersport and watching it. There's a lot of hard work. There's a lot of luck that goes into it. And I think the biggest thing to realize is that when you are given that opportunity, you've got to use everything possible to make sure you stay there. And it all starts with you finding what you want to do. So you want to go, and if it's working at a campus radio station, writing for a local newspaper, whatever it is, it takes time to get there. And a lot of people these days think they can go from being someone on their couch watching football to be a Supersport presenter overnight. It doesn't happen like that. So it takes time and hard work, and in my case, a lot of luck.
Yeah,
I don't know if that answers your question.
No, absolutely. That's a very thorough answer indeed, and I think it's a lot of a lot of people can draw a lot of strengths and motivation from that. I think what I picked out is, no matter what you pursue, you need a level of perseverance to be able to get to where you want to be. And as you mentioned, Sias, I mean, it's all good and well that we sit in our armchairs and in our recliner couches or so on, and we comment on certain things on games that we watch, and we are make-believe pundits, but it's a completely different story actually doing it in front of a camera with millions of people watching you.
Yeah, definitely. I think the thing that people don't realize is, let's go back a little bit. I don't know if you remember when Supersport had studio for Premier League games and for League Cup and FA Cup games, before it moved to that whole package that we get from the Premier League in the UK, we see on our screens today. But I remember a thing where it was Andre Arendse, Sean Bartlett, and myself, and we were doing in a League Cup, I think, 5th round game, and they basically had postponed the start or delayed the kickoff because of a frozen pitch. And I was sitting there and I'm looking at these two guys going like, these two are legends. What am I doing here? You start sort of thinking like, I haven't played in England. I played a bit of club football here, but nothing like anything serious. And you start to realize how privileged you are to be in that position. And then you've got a director talking in your ear the whole time while you're trying to listen to what Bartlett and Andre Arendse are saying. And I mean, these two, as you well know, legends. But it gave me a sense of being able to say, okay, well, I'm the fan here. What do the fans at home want to see? And we started talking about mushy peas and pies and what guys do before games and before things kick off. And it sort of made me realize how lucky I was to be in that position. And unfortunately, it's a thing of the past now at Supersport. But it's not easy, and it takes time, and you're going to make mistakes. And I'm not even going to tell you about the time that I almost choked on a fishbone just before we were going live the one day. So that's why I don't eat fish and chips before we go on air. But it is one of those things that takes practice. But I think a lot of people need to realize how privileged they are to be in that position, and that they should never take it for granted, because it's such a great and exciting yet challenging place to be. But, well, what a ride it was.
It says now with the current pandemic going on around the world, it obviously made a few months where there was no sport at all. So how has the work actually been affected? How has your work been affected by this current pandemic? And how has it been for you?
Yeah, it's very, very difficult at the moment. I mean, no teams are really training. And initially, when lockdown started, we were all sort of in a press conference waiting for the PSL to announce what they were going to do just before the lockdown was announced. And at that point, things changed very quickly. Less stories meant less opportunities to tell stories, and everything became Zoom. So all of a sudden, you're doing Zoom and Skype interviews, and you then realize you took training for granted. You took boring SAFA press conferences for granted. You know, those days sitting and listening to Dr. Danny O'Donnell, you're like, almost like, oh my word, is this ever going to end? You actually miss those things. And just seeing a team train in real life, you know. So it puts a lot of things into perspective. And it, once again, it's told me that, or taught me that you cannot take anything for granted. And you've got to appreciate every minute that you are, because as a sports journalist, I'm a very privileged person, and you get to see the inside track, you know, whereas sports fans, they miss out on that because they don't have that access. So I think it's been very difficult with my current employers, China Global TV Network, based in Beijing. Obviously, I'm a correspondent here in South Africa for them. We've obviously had to try and be creative how we tell our stories, but it certainly has had a huge effect on everyone. And I just want to, say we're obviously thinking of all those people that have lost loved ones along the way, because I don't think there's anyone who hasn't been affected by this global pandemic.
Just on that note as well, when things do sort of normalize and you guys start getting back to work, we start seeing more sporting games and events taking place. Do you see things, ever being the same or being the way it was before the pandemic struck?
I think the way the stadium experience happens now will definitely change. I think from hand sanitizing at the gate to temperature checks to the way people sit in the stands, I think there's going to be a massive, massive change in terms of the hygiene aspects, the way, almost this biosafe environment or bubble that they talk about, that comes into play. So I think as fans, we probably going to be the most affected because it's not going to be the same. And it's sad, because even if there's a vaccine in the next 6 months, a year, 18 months, whatever it is, we're all going to feel it as fans, and that stadium experience is going to be something that changes the way we travel. It's unfortunate, because I think it's going to be a long time before we do get back to normal, Riaz.
Just based on what you said now, it kind of struck me that you mentioned having to test temperatures and use hand sanitizers in stadiums. Let's take a big international cricket match. Let's say it's the Wanderers or Newlands, or we take us away to Derby. Let's say Chiefs or Pirates. I mean, Chiefs and Pirates, it was like 80,000, 90,000 people. Do you think that amount of people within a space is going to be manageable for whoever oversees the game or is in charge?
Well, recently we did a story on the F&B Stadium, Soccer City, about there was a report in the Citizen newspaper about them being turned into a field hospital. I mean, we know the 2010 World Cup was insane. Like F&B Stadium, it's kitted out. There's a medical facility. They can pull it off. But the thing is, I think what's the most striking for me is that they would have to reduce the amount of people, and how those fans, as you well put, react to that. I mean, we're already seeing a situation where fans are rocking up on the day when tickets are sold out, trying to get into the stadium. So it almost has to become an educational thing too. So our fans also have to buy into it. And, there's maybe opportunity here for fan parks or, guys on the side to do screenings, but they will have to reduce the numbers at some point, because there's no ways you can have 90,000 people in Soccer City being socially distant, not transmitting the virus. Hopefully by that time we have protocols in place that prevent that, but it's going to take a lot of education, a lot of discipline, and it's going to take a lot of hard work from our football authorities to get that right. And stadium management in particular, we're going to have the right people on the ground to basically police the situation, because no one wants to go back to empty stadiums again. It sucks. The sports isn't the same. It really isn't. And I'm tired of crowd noises. I want to see fans.
Absolutely. Well, we are very happy and fortunate, of course, for the crowd noises. I think for ourselves, Wasim and I discussed, the first weekend of the Bundesliga, there was absolutely no noise whatsoever, no artificial noise. For me, I couldn't watch 10 minutes of it, no matter the quality on the pitch. I think, definitely the fans add a massive factor. They bring, the vibe, the atmosphere, and so forth, and that's very, very crucial now. Of course, Sias, one of your hobbies, well, not hobbies, but your interest, basically, we found out was the UFC. Now, I can't say that I'm too much of a UFC fan these days. I don't, watch as much as I used to back in the day. When I look back at maybe 10, 12 years ago, I started watching the UFC when Brock Lesnar came into the UFC, because he had that factor where he, brought people from another sport or another genre into watch the UFC. If I think of names, back 10, 12 years ago, I think of people like BJ Penn, I think of George St. Pierre, I think of Chuck Liddell, Frank Mir, Tito Ortiz, Rampage Jackson. That's when I used to watch UFC. Over the years, except if Khabib is in a fight, I'll probably tune in. Tell us, the crop of fighters that are in the UFC right now compared to 10 or 12 years ago, what sort of changes have we seen in the organization, in MMA, in the type of fighters coming through, and what's your take on the Dana White's fight island as well at the moment?
Look, I think Dana White is a man with ginormous kahunas to have pulled something like that off, because he's faced so much stick. But once again, they've put in a bubble, they've done the testing, they've had the money, they've had the funding to do it. EFC could do that. I mean, EFC Worldwide have a same facility. They could also do it. But for some reason, they have to wait for their turn to happen. They don't have maybe the money that the Dana White and the UFC does. But I just want to take my hat off to the UFC, because it's been phenomenal to see, these guys in action, be it at the UFC Apex in Vegas, or be it at Fight Island in Yas Island in Abu Dhabi. But the fact of the matter is, it's been good for sports fans, regardless if you're not a fight fan. It's been good for sports fans, because the Masvidal Usman fight, that was 1.3 million pay-per-views just from that fight. That's money in the bank for the UFC, even though they've borrowed money to basically put this on. But to answer your question, I think 10, 12 years ago, you had guys who were strong in certain aspects. So you had good wrestlers who would use their wrestling. You'd have guys who were good boxers who would rely on their boxing. You're now seeing a hybrid type fighter and athlete where the guy is strong in all departments. And those guys that are on the top of their divisions are good in all divisions. So, I mean, in all aspects. So you've got guys there that are strong in all aspects. They can negate any attack from their opponent. So I think the fighters have evolved, but at the same time, a guy like George St. Pierre, he is a freak. He's a dominant champion and takes some beating to beat his record. So beside one or two of the GOATs that are there, and all due respect to some of those pioneers that have led the way for the guys today, I think the standard of competition is so much higher in the UFC that guys are forced to evolve and become these hybrids. So you might have Kamaru Usman, who's a fantastic wrestler, and yes, against Jorge Masvidal, he used his wrestling, and it wasn't pretty, but he was ready for anything. So it's just an exciting time for MMA all over the world, and in particular in South Africa with the EFC.
What our fighters in South Africa and in the EFC, how do they stack up to the fighters in the United States, in the UFC, and what do they need to do to get to that level?
We've got some fantastic talent in South Africa. We really do. And you look at a guy like Faiz Jacobs, he was an Uber driver just the other day, and he stepped up and he's a champion. I'm a huge fan. But I think that obviously in the places like the US, these guys have a lot more quality training partners and a lot more people in their gyms. So they have a lot more access to that. South Africa has some fantastic gyms, some fantastic coaches. But I think it just comes down to maybe depth and that the US just maybe has so much more. But I can tell you now, Dricus du Plessis will be heading to the UFC. Temba Garumbo will be heading to the UFC. JP Bass is on Dana White's Contender Series. There's a lot of guys making noise who are putting up their hands and will be in the UFC. So we're not that far behind, but when it comes to depth and training partners, that's maybe where South Africa is a little bit limited. But if you look into the African continent, you look at the guys, Francis Ngannou, Kamaru Usman, Israel Adesanya, even though they're out of New Zealand, Africa's got serious talent, man. And the UFC needs to bring an event to Africa and showcase our talent. Imagine we have those title fights with Africans. It would be amazing. It would be amazing.
Absolutely. I can't discuss the UFC without popping you a question of the infamous renegade, Mr. Conor McGregor. People are often polarized by him. I had a friend, in the gym that, couldn't stand him, thought he was bad for the sport, even though he was bringing money in, didn't agree with his behavior and so on. What's your take on Conor McGregor?
Love him or hate him, we're all talking about him. And he's retired twice. And he's the type of guy that puts bums on seats. Love him or hate him. He's a fantastic athlete. He's done so much for the sport. And we definitely want to see him back in the UFC. So, maybe he's sort of taking time just to focus on his other career. Maybe he's looking at a rematch with Floyd Mayweather. He's a smart, shrewd businessman. But I think deep down he's a good guy, and he also creates that. I mean, his nickname's Notorious, for crying out loud. You're not going to like him, but he's great value and he's good for the sport. So I had my initial thoughts when he was back and he was fighting a guy like Cowboy Cerrone. And Cowboys, I'm a fan because he can drink a beer out of a boot. I mean, that's his trademark. But at the end of the day, you've got to love Conor McGregor because he brings so much hype. And when he's in the octagon, he's phenomenal to watch. So, yeah, he just against Khabib, he was found wanting, and Khabib is just another level. I'm a huge fan of Khabib, but as I say, for the sport, you need bad characters. Look at wrestling. You need a hook. You need someone who's going to be the bad guy, and you need the good guy, and put them together, and that sells tickets. So, I think Conor's a very clever businessman, and he's an outstanding MMA athlete.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I made a comment that basically, Conor McGregor is to Dana White what Stone Cold Steve Austin was to Vince McMahon to one of my friends. So yes, absolutely money makers, and yeah, absolutely. Those are guys that we expect a lot from, and like you said, they put bums in seats.
Sorry, my connection is just a bit poor at the moment. But how is supporting the entertainers back in the 90s? And you actually challenging and being up there with the very best in England.
I didn't get all of that, but I think what you were asking was, what is it like supporting the entertainers and watching them challenge for the top of the title and that sort of thing. Look, I think I went to boarding school, and we only had certain times where we could actually watch sports. So if we got a chance to watch a Newcastle game, and luckily one of the prefects was a Newcastle United fan, so he had control of the TV remote, so he was the one putting it on. But I must be honest, it was kind of, it's like, how can I say it? It's a bit like watching Alan Saint-Maximin at the moment, in a way, because there's talent there, and he knows that he can create things. And that entertainers team with Kevin Keegan at the helm, and we'll never forget his fantastic speech that found him wanting. Anyway, I would love it if he hadn't made that speech. But the fact of the matter is, the entertainers just played football like they didn't care. And if they conceded 3, they were like, cool, we're going to score 4, and that was this like almost bravado watching them in action. So it was something that I would say solidified my support for Newcastle. And you've grown over time, and when Sir Bobby Robson was there, I mean, he's an absolute legend. And I mean, we talk about Jose Mourinho, how much respect he had for Sir Bobby working under him, and Newcastle's come through a huge journey. And if you look at Newcastle, it's the one club in the UK, in the Premier League, that's almost a one city club, like London has how many, Manchester has how many, it's one of those special places. And I think that's what makes it even more appealing, is because those working class people in Newcastle rely so heavily on those results that you want them to do well. So it's hard not to fall in love with Newcastle, and hard not to feel those painful defeats, especially when they squander leads and that sort of thing. And I understand that you've had a self-imposed lockdown, Wasim, for a long time before lockdown was actually announced.
Exactly. And in these years, you mentioned Sir Bobby Robson, obviously a legend in our side of the world. But when I hear Jose Mourinho some 15, 20 years later speaking so highly of him, it just shows the value of the man. But what was it like? Because at that stage, we were in the Champions League for a couple of years. We were in Europe quite regularly. What was it like supporting the club in the early 2000s?
Yeah, look, I think I actually was in varsity, and then played some cricket in the UK during that time. So I wasn't fortunate enough at that stage to go to a game, but watching the odd game there, I mean, so Bobby commanded so much respect, and you had guys who were there were some real gamers in that team. You think about the guys that were in the mix there, and they were the type of guys that could suddenly change a game. And you think about it, like Barcelona coming to St. James's Park today, you like, or playing in the Nou Camp, you're like, how, on what planet? It doesn't make any sense to think that. I mean, Manchester United, you can see that's synonymous. The biggest club in the world. You expect them to be playing the Barcelonas and Juventus and Real Madrids and that sort of thing, but Newcastle, you don't. And I think that's what was so cool, was that we got to play against the biggest names, the biggest clubs, and all as a bunch of the Geordies. It was something special. It was something to witness. But I think what was more incredible was just Sir Bobby and how he controlled the media, how he looked after his players. I mean, he's one of the most well-respected guys, even today. He's been gone a while now, but yeah. And I must tell you, in 2015, I was fortunate enough, and Riaz will like the story because it didn't end well for Newcastle in 2015, but I was invited to go with their sponsors at the time, Wonga, and take a winner from 5FM with me, Andreas. And I remember standing outside St. James's Park, and I was like, I don't know how to explain it, but my mind was blown, because there's the statue of Sir Bobby. The Strawberry Pub is down there. You're looking at this incredible cathedral of football. Regardless of who you support, you have to be able to respect St. James's Park. And that Bobby, I must be honest, I got like goosebumps standing there. Even though the guy's gone, it's just a statue. It's not the real guy, but just standing there, you almost felt like, okay, this is real. Now you know what the hype is about. So, yeah, it was an incredible experience. Unfortunately, Ashley Young scored. We lost 1-0, and we were relegated that season. So, not good memories, but incredible experience nonetheless, to say I've at least been to St. James's Park and watched the game.
So, Sias, of course, we discussed the legendary Bobby Robson. Of course, he had the ability to galvanize not only the squad and the players, but also the fans around St. James's Park. What do you think led to his actual downfall? As I've mentioned, there was sort of a theory going around that once players started earning more, they started losing respect for the great man. What do you think actually led to his downfall and his subsequent resignation?
I can only speculate, but Newcastle has a way of chasing managers away, doesn't it? Over the years, you think what Kevin Keegan did, and it almost like was surprising why they didn't keep Kevin Keegan, and it's the same with Sir Bobby Robson. But it's like you say, once you kind of lose that change room, there's not much you can do. And Bobby's a proud man. He was a proud man. He's the type of guy that would have thought, okay, it's time for me to call it a day. So I think the pressure certainly came from above in trying to get him to maybe play a certain way and change his philosophy or change the way he approached the game, especially as as you rightly say, money came into the players, and suddenly egos, and the game changed. And maybe Sir Bobby just acknowledged that he wasn't the right man to continue taking it forward, despite some of the results, which were still very positive. So, yeah, as I say, Newcastle United have a terrible record of keeping managers, and you just have to look at the Rafa Benitez, Mike Ashley scenario. I mean, I know Rafa is certainly not an easy guy to work with, in that it's Rafa's way or the highway, and he wanted full control, and Ashley wasn't prepared to do that. But once again, Rafa had started building something, and you can see that in the way Newcastle were playing under Steve Bruce, that the foundations Rafa put in were very good ones. And, you know, that the change in formation, having the wing backs, almost sort of allowing the opposition all the possession and then to hit them on the counter. It's something we see in the Premier League a lot. Teams are happy without the ball, funny enough. You would have thought in the past they want all the possession, but teams without the possession are quite happy because they don't have to make the move. They can pounce on the mistakes. So, and it comes back to the Steve Bruce thing. And I had my doubts over Steve Bruce, because for me, he came across as a journeyman manager. And that's with all due respect. I know he's done almost 1,000 games as a manager, and that is an incredible feat. I know he's a Geordie boy. He's born and bred, Manchester United legend, cup winner, league winner. But I just thought, like, after Rafa, with the stature that he had, the respect that he had, we were headed in the right direction. But I've eaten humble pie, and Steve Bruce should be given an opportunity, should the takeover happen, whenever that will happen, hopefully soon after the season concludes, to at least have a season with the new owners and get some decent players in, because I think it would be a huge mistake to throw away what he's built. It'll be unfair to him. To just suddenly bring in someone, one of these Pochettino, although it looks like Pochettino is going to go somewhere else, but you know what I mean? It just would be unfair to Stevie Bruce, because he's done a phenomenal job with a very average squad. Joe Linton is for me, leaves a lot to be desired. He works his socks off, nothing in the final third. It's actually embarrassing. Almiron's the same. He's getting better, but what is he doing in the final third? He runs his socks off, but it's one thing to run your socks off. It needs to be clinical. And then Gale comes in and Gale scores goals, you know. So, look, there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of investment that needs to be done, especially defensively, actually across the park. I mean, we need someone alongside John Joe Shelby. Isaac Hayden looks like he doesn't want to be at Newcastle for much longer, so he's probably going to leave. Matty Longstaff probably to Udinese. Sean Longstaff has had his injury problems. We need a striker. It's a pity that we couldn't hold on to Rondon, because that song about Rondon, I don't know if you heard the song about Rondon, Wasim. It was outstanding. It was set to, what's his name now? Oh, man, I want to sing the song. Rafa's brought in Rondon, did a deal with West Brom. Get yourself a goal, son. It was something like that, but it was fantastic. But the point I'm trying to make is that Newcastle needs love, man. And Ashley hasn't shown it love. We've had 3 relegations since he took over. We've got to get this deal done. And I know the Saudi Arabian amnesty and their human rights violations and thing, but for the greater good of this club, it needs new owners, it needs a new lick of paint, and it needs some new players. It really does.
Sias, do you, you've obviously touched on the takeover. There's been a 4-month delay with it. Do you foresee that it's actually going to go ahead? Because every week I'm changing my tune, because if I follow social media, the one week it looks like, okay, it's definitely going to happen. The buyers are confident. Then the next week, another report comes out, creates some doubt. So do you feel it's going to go through, or do you think that there's a chance that the Premier League will block it?
Let me flip this on you, Wasim. How did you feel when you heard, oh my goodness, Amanda Stavely, the Reuben brothers, and the Saudi investment fund were coming for Newcastle United? It was great, wasn't it? It was exciting.
Absolutely exciting. I mean, to even dream of top signings and a bit of ambition, because that's the whole thing with Rafa, is why the fans loved him, is because he showed ambition. He felt that this club is too big to just be happy to be in the Premier League. The club should be fighting for the top 6, top 8 on a regular basis. And so I was over the moon when I started reading the reports that it could be a takeover and, you know, limitless money, so to speak. But yeah, it's obviously been a bit of a frustrating wait after having all that excitement the first month or two, thinking, okay, the approval will happen soon, but now it's obviously dragged on 4 months. We don't even know if it's going to go ahead. So yeah, it's been a bit of a frustrating wait, but I still have that hope that hopefully that approval will come.
I think it will come. I think they're just waiting for the league to finish, and I think there was so much emphasis on getting the league done. And I mean, Sunday at St James's Park against the champions. That will be like, for me, when they bring down the curtain on the season, I think we will see some movements, and I think the Premier League would be fools not to accept that, not because I'm a Newcastle fan, but because the amount of money it will pump into the stadium, it will pump into the jobs. You look what Man City has done. I mean, it's incredible. And these guys are richer than City, technically, the guys that want to buy Newcastle. So it just shows that, football needs it. And we need that sort of excitement back. I think it will happen. I think there's a lot of noise coming from Qatar and those places, beIN Sports, trying to fight the whole piracy. But I personally think that the UK and Saudi Arabia actually has a very good relationship. The government has obviously said they're not going to get involved, despite MPs getting involved and saying they've got to block it. For football, at the end of the day, we need this transfer to go through. And this American guy who's making noise on the side about he will take the bid if this doesn't happen, for me, that's just causing more distraction. So I don't know if you read the Newcastle Chronicle at all. I subscribe to their newsletter. Yeah, so Mark Douglas and the guys there seem to be on the top of things, and Lee Ryder. So we'll see what happens. But I think at the end of the day, it will go through. It's just, I think they want to get the league done, and then there's no more distractions. But the paperwork's there. It's been lodged. It's now the money is ready. It's like, come on, let's do this.
Yeah, there's a transfer window that's opening on Monday as well. So we can't wait too much longer, because otherwise the club basically gets affected by that.
Yeah, I'm happy if they sell John Lenton. I really don't mind.
They can replace him with Mbappe.
Look, I mean, let's be honest. I actually, I mean, it would be nice to see Coutinho running around wearing Newcastle. But to be honest, I don't care if they're rock stars or they're just quality players. At the end of the day, we've had a lack of depth and quality for a long time, man. And it's not sustainable. The best player we have by far is Alan Saint-Maximin right now. Dubravka is not far behind. John Joe Shelby's been rock solid, but he also turns on and off, So I think Almiron has been okay. Joe Linton, disappointing. Defensively, Fernandes has probably been the most solid guy, apart from Jamal Lascelles, who has his own inconsistencies. Yeah. But you're right. Across the board, investment needs to happen. I don't care if it's Mbappe. I don't care if it's Neymar Jr. End of the day, I'm happy with a Jack Grealish, a Declan Rice, a McGinn from Villa. You know what I mean? I'm just saying, James Ward-Prowse, that sort of thing. I'm happy to go English, and why not focus on English talent? So, yeah, we'll wait and see, man. But it's got to happen. It really has to. It's now at a point where everyone's kind of like getting bored of it.
Mm-hmm. Sias and Wasim, I can see you guys are getting quite jovial over there, so enjoying yourselves. I can almost see you guys licking your lips at some of the names that are coming out of your mouths and your tongues. Just a question to both of you, and to you first, Sias. I mean, you guys are talking about signings, but just how important is it to get proper structures in the club and, get proper management? I always believe that, you can't, there's always going to be turmoil on the pitch if there's turmoil off the pitch. And as you mentioned, you guys have been through a torrid time under Mike Ashley, and it's been really difficult for you. So how much more important is it to, have him step away from the club and just have new owners come in?
I think it's vital that they upgrade the training ground, and that's something Rafa Benitez was talking about for a long time. Just the surface that they use. I mean, at 2015. We were fortunate to go and have a tour for the training ground. We had lunch with the players. We saw the gyms and that. And it probably looks like a League One club, in all honesty, if you had to compare it. And that said, with all due respect to the training ground at Newcastle, compared to City, Arsenal, Tottenham, Chelsea. It's one of the things that really needs that. The academy players that they have there. I mean, Sean Bartlett's son was there. Tyreek was there, and he unfortunately couldn't crack on from the under 23s. But like, they have some serious talent there. So I think it's important to possibly look at starting with a training ground, resurface whatever it needs to be done, and then to look at some proper scouts. Get the scout structure sorted out, because I think that's something that's also, we've signed some dodgy French players for many times, and you go like, who the hell is this guy? Like Remy Cabella, like what the hell, or whatever it was. But I'm just saying, there's a lot that needs to happen at Newcastle. It's a project. It's a work in progress. It's probably, in all honesty, a 5-year project before we really start seeing some results. But it needs money. It needs love. And it really just needs some guidance. I just don't think they've had the right football brains in charge for a long time. Marcin, your thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, and it's not trying to harp on Rafa Benitez, but that's what he said. He felt that if you have a better academy, you have better players coming into the first team. That then saves you from having to spend a lot, on bringing in players that are going to have to, come into the club and they might not adapt and all of that. So he wanted a full overhaul of the club in terms of scouting, in terms of the academy, training, everything of that sort. So for me, I agree. It will take a 5-year plan to get the club to be where they want to be. But I think it's something that if you do it right, it then can maintain success over a long period of time. So I think, let's hope that if the sides do come in, they give it time, and I'm sure they will, because they've got this vision 2030 that they've been talking about for so many years now, and so I'm sure that they will give it the loving care that the club needs, and then the results we'll see gradually improve over the next few years, and then hopefully we can look forward to days in the Champions League again.
Yeah, case in point is Manchester United. Look at the young players, Greenwood, Williams, these guys, they've come through the academy. They're youngsters, they're babies. But because the academy is solid, because Sir Alex it is going back to Sir Alex days. They put the structures in place and they're reaping the rewards today. United might not be challenging for the title, but it won't be long before we see Manchester United knocking on that title door, because I think City will probably win it next season. I think Liverpool won't be able to reproduce this season again. This was a freak season. But I think the likes of Chelsea and Manchester United will be knocking hard on those doors. They will be.
That sounds like absolute music to my ears, quite frankly, Sias. I think you're more of an optimist than I am as a United fan. I'm kind of treading carefully. I don't want to get too ahead of myself. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, for Liverpool to replicate what they've done this season, and let's be honest, I mean, they've been phenomenal in the league this season. They've won it, the absolute canter. I think Virgil van Dijk said last night that they won it by a mile, and you really can't argue with that. Whether you're the most staunch rival fan of Liverpool Football Club, you have to admit that they've been above and beyond everybody else in the league. So, hopefully, fingers crossed. They seem to be very determined and look like they want to be spurred on to replicate this and, defend their title. But I certainly hope, as much as you do, that, rather a City than a Liverpool. And if United can creep in there, then absolutely.
Sias, I've also got a question for you on football in general. We've got the Champions League coming up next month. It's reaching the pinnacle of the season, basically, with quarterfinals, semi-finals, and final. Who do you foresee going on to actually win it this season? Seeing that it's obviously we've had a pandemic, so PSG haven't had games, whereas Liverpool have been knocked out. So City are going to be in it. So who do you see challenging for the Champions League next month?
We're in for another roller coaster. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I've loved having football almost every night. It's been insane. It's like I get into bed with a cup of tea. Hey, the game's on. It's fantastic.
Yes.
And I think the Champions League is something like 11 games in 16 days or something, if I'm not mistaken. Or is it? I might be wrong, but it's also going to come thick and fast. City are the one team I see that are probably the most hungry. Considering that they've secured second place in the Premier League, they haven't won the Champions League but this is Champions League, I mean, we've seen it. There's teams there that on the night have rock stars, and these guys are game changers. I think City will be most hungry, but I don't know. It's brilliant, isn't it? It's perfectly set up. So I think it's going to be one of those scenarios where you might get a team like PSG who are a bit fresher, but that ring rust will show. And the teams that have rhythm now and have been, even if the game's coming thick and fast, and City doesn't have the biggest squad. But it will be the teams that have regular football right now or have been in a rhythm that will be challenging for the title. So, yeah, it's going to be fascinating. I can't put my name behind a specific team, but I would love to see Pep win it. I really would.
Yeah, I think it will also basically deter a lot of Pep's detractors. I think a lot of people criticized him a lot for not winning a Champions League while he was at Bayern Munich, and I think he's almost being kind of measured on his success in the Champions League following what he did at Barcelona. And I think the same kind of pressure is on him at the moment at Man City. I just wanted to ask you real quick, just, stepping a bit aside from the Man City situation or the Champions League, Sias, you guys were talking about foreign ownership into the Premier League, or was all great foreign ownership such as Roman Abramovich, FSG for Liverpool, hopefully the easy takeover for you guys at Newcastle. There's also been a fair share of poor owners. Randy Lerner at Villa stepped away. Of course, almost a decade ago, Benkies took over Blackburn with the promise that they're going to find the likes of Ronaldinho and Kaká. Blackburn are now in the Championship. They were in League One. The Ornstein brothers at Blackpool, I mean, they've been struggling. So do you feel that, foreign ownership really has a solid place in the Premier League? And what should the Premier League kind of do to tighten the screws on foreign ownership, especially considering a model such as the Bundesliga, where it's based on, fans buying into the club and, members buying into the club and really having a more community feel?
Look, the Premier League is not just a league for England. It's very much a global league, isn't it? And their growth has been phenomenal. So I'm not against foreign owners, and I agree with you. There have been some shockers along the way, but I suppose we can can we trust the Premier League's, tests that they do? Because there's been some certain dodgy characters that have come through and own football clubs in England. But I think it's good for the game because it only grows the brand even more. And for example, with Saudi Arabia now, Newcastle United, there'll be tours, obviously, for Newcastle to Saudi Arabia. There's no doubt about it. They'll set up academies or whatever it is. So I think the knock-on effect from a business point of view is the way to go. I think the danger is where money comes in, that the focus is more on buying exceptional players instead of developing homegrown talent. So I think there needs to be rules implemented that a certain percentage is spent on your academy and producing like under 23 players, and you have to have like 2 under 23 players in your match day squad or something like that down the line. I'd love to see just something along those lines where youngsters are rewarded a lot more than just like having a Kaká arrive at Blackburn, for example. You know what I mean? So in the same breath, though, I think it's a business, isn't it? At the end of the day, football's a business. It's a money-making thing. So that also will always play its part. But in conclusion, if I can put it that way, the more money coming into the English game, the better it is to grow the game and to get the best academies, to get the best coaches, and just to continue its growth, which has been insane. So, yeah, I'm happy to see it as long as there's an investment into young talents, and also maybe even to try and get more African players into the Premier League. Some way, or because I think we've seen a few Africans that have gone across and dominated, like Liverpool, but like Samata at Villa and Trezeguet, the Egyptian. It's always nice to see that. So I don't know if that's answered your question, but at the end of the day, it needs to have some trickle down effect And because there's also the danger, obviously, that your bigger ones get bigger. I mean, we've seen that in the Premier League, aren't we? I mean, from 6 or 7 down, with the exception of Sheffield United, there's a gap between that top 6 and the rest of the Premier League. So there's got to be something done to try and level the playing field. Maybe they need to introduce what the US sports do, a draft system where, I don't know, it's obviously a different model. But anyway, at the end of the day, we all want the best players in the Premier League, don't we?
Absolutely.
One final question from my side, Sias. We obviously you've had the pleasure of working at 5FM at Supersport. So you've obviously met superstars or stars in the sports world. Have you ever been starstruck, or which famous footballer have you met that has basically made you extremely excited to do the interview? Have you ever been starstruck?
Yes, definitely. I've actually got two instances. The one when I was at campus radio at Tax FM, a mate of mine was working for Umbro at the time, and Umbro in Brooklyn or Menden or something like that were running something, and it was very low key. But he's like, "Listen, there's someone here who I think you might want to interview for your show." So I'm like, well, "Who is it? Tell me." And he's like, "No, don't worry. I'm just going to pass you the phone." So he passes me the phone, and I'm going, "Who on earth could this be?" I mean, it's Umbro, whatever. It was Alan Shearer, and I was like,
Wow.
"Oh my goodness!" And I didn't know what to say. So Alan Shearer was on the phone. I was scrambling to get into the studio to record the interview, while not trying to lose him. And he only had 10 minutes. So I was starstruck, and I ended up getting 3 questions in. But the one that I felt the most starstruck with was when Vodacom were doing the Orlando Pirates, Kaizer Chiefs, Manchester United. I was fortunate enough to be one of the few journos to interview Sir Alex Ferguson. And I just remember standing waiting, and I promise you, I was sweating. And I had extra deodorant on that day, but I was sweating because it's Fergie. And he's football royalty wherever you are in the world. And we had 3 questions each. It was very the press officer was very strict and hard. And I was just like, "Please don't mess this up. Please don't mess this up. Please don't mess this up." So Alex Ferguson, I can't remember a single thing from the interview. I just remember looking at his piercing eyes, and but the interview turned out okay. So yeah, I was certainly starstruck there. He's just, but actually, what a nice guy. So it was those 2 moments stand out for me.
Did you, Sias, I have to ask, since you stood in front of Sir Alex, did you have any sense of intimidation standing in front of him?
He's got an air of like that sort of like aura. He's got a certain presence, and I mean, as you well know, I don't need to. I'm basically, Riaz, that the Sky's basically won everything there is to win in football. But standing there waiting for him was worse. I think it would have been better if I walked into a room where he was already sitting, but that he came up and approached you and he shook out his hand in that Scottish accent, and you're like, "Oh my goodness, I'm in the presence of a footballing legend, royalty." That made it even more intimidating. So I think he certainly came across as quite hardcore. But once he realized he's actually he's a good guy, he's a good guy. But there was certainly an amount of how can I say? You felt that presence before he even was in front of me, and it was like a foot away. It was crazy. It was crazy.
Sias, I just want to say on behalf of Riaz and myself, thank you so much for availing your time. We've actually gone over time due to my connection issues. I do apologize, but thank you for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I hope that we'll be following your career, and I hope that one day we can get you back onto the show again.
Anytime. You've got my details. Please, Wasim, reach out anytime. Riaz, thank you so much. It's been an absolute honor. And yeah, let's continue this conversation and keep up the stellar work, guys. You guys are doing a great job on the podcast, and keep, as they say, feeding the monster. Keep producing content and talking about football, the game we all love.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.